My name is Natalie, I'm 34 years old, and I will never forget that fateful family dinner. What started as our typical monthly gathering quickly turned into a nightmare when my father suddenly looked me in the eyes and asked, "Tell me about the $500,000 I gave you. What did you do with it?" My hands went cold. $500,000? What was he talking about? Across the table, my brother Josh turned ghostly pale. On his phone screen, I caught a glimpse of his latest post, a cruel poll about my 11-year-old daughter. What's worse, her stupid haircut or her nasty personality? My throat closed. Before I could properly defend myself, the doorbell rang. The police had arrived. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because this story will make you question what family really means. We grew up in a small Ohio town where the Main Street Parade passed the same brick courthouse every July, and everybody knew which families paid for the new Little League bleachers. Our last name meant something there. My father, Robert, built that meaning with calloused hands and a calculator he kept in his breast pocket. He started with a single rusted pickup and 2 day laborers, framing porches and patching roofs until the company trucks wore the logo he drew on graph paper at the kitchen table. He liked to say he poured our childhood in concrete. To him, love looked like invoices paid on time. My mother, Nancy, made the rest of the picture. She kept the house spotless and her lipstick perfect even on snow days. Pot roast on Sundays, casserole on Wednesdays, church on the second pew, cardigans folded by color. She took holiday photos with the precision of a project manager, directing us into place so the Christmas letter looked effortless. Dad would stand behind her like a satisfied client. Josh arrived 2 years before me and never stopped arriving. When he was 5, the town paper ran a photo of him holding a T-ball trophy twice the size of his head, and Dad framed it next to the company's first big contract. By high school, Josh was either at practice, at a party, or polishing the used Mustang Dad bought to teach responsibility. Coaches called him a natural. Girls wore his Letterman jacket to the diner. He could laugh off anything. If he got in trouble for skipping class, the principal would clap him on the shoulder and tell him to save it for the game. I was the quiet one who read books at the table while the TV blared. Teachers wrote attentive on my report cards and mature for her age. I was president of the book club, treasurer of the Future Educators chapter, and an expert at avoiding cafeteria politics by eating in the guidance office. When I said I wanted to be a teacher, my English teacher cried. When I told my father, he swallowed and asked if that meant benefits. Dad judged the world on 2 axes, profit and perception. A man who could add a 0 to a bid and still land it had his respect. A woman who could carry a room in heels deserved a compliment about her polish. He didn't understand why anyone would choose a career with a starting salary posted on a school district website. "You're sharp," he'd say, as if it were a problem to solve. You could do marketing, real estate, law. The construction office ran on men like him, punctual, sunburned, decisive. He wanted me to learn the business by osmosis, but not enough to hand me a hard hat. Mom's love was gentler and more guarded. She ironed my blouses before debate tournaments and snuck an extra 20 into my backpack for field trips. But even she measured worth in presentation. When I brought home a certificate for a statewide essay competition, she put it on the fridge behind a photo of Josh sliding into home, just until company leaves. But company seemed to last years. When college letters arrived, Josh's came in a padded envelope with a baseball schedule and a photo of the stadium. Mine came on crisp paper from the state teaching college with a list of scholarships and a welcome to the School of Education. At dinner, Dad raised his glass to Josh's opportunities and then to me for being practical. In that town, money wasn't just money. It was respect, tables at fundraisers, first names with the bank manager, your logo on Little League hats. Dad sponsored teams, paid for the fireworks one 4th of July, and got a plaque from the chamber. People shook his hand like it guaranteed their roof wouldn't leak. He never bragged, not exactly. He simply lived as if success were good manners. But a ledger lived behind his eyes. Teaching, in his mind, was a subtraction he tolerated because I was a daughter who didn't cause trouble. So one day, I became an elementary school teacher almost by instinct, as if all those hours in the library during childhood had been leading me toward a classroom of my own. At 22, with a fresh degree in education and more hope than experience, I walked into a noisy first-grade classroom and felt something click inside me. For the first time in my life, I belonged at the center of a room. Not because I was the loudest or the most charming, but because small children needed me, depended on me, and listened to me in a way my own family never had. Teaching has never been glamorous, but it gives me purpose. My days begin with a thermos of coffee, a 20-minute drive to school in my used Corolla, and the sight of little faces pressing against the glass of the door as they wait for me to unlock it. "Good morning, Miss Clark," they shout in unison, their voices tumbling over each other. Every day is messy and unpredictable, filled with glue sticks that run out too soon, missing crayons, shoelaces that constantly come undone, and tears over playground misunderstandings. Yet I love it. I love the pride in a student's eyes when they finally read a sentence aloud without stumbling. Outside of work, my world revolves around my daughter, Hannah. She is 11, with stubborn curls and a spark in her eyes that tells me she will never let anyone push her to the sidelines the way I allowed myself to be pushed. We live in a small rented 2-bedroom apartment on the second floor of an aging brick building. The rent eats up more than half my paycheck, but I manage. I budget carefully, hunting for sales, and tucking away whatever I can into a savings account I rarely talk about. Each deposit, no matter how small, brings me closer to buying a modest house in the suburbs, a place with a yard where Hannah can ride her bike without dodging parked cars, a place with enough room for the two of us to breathe. Every evening after dinner, we do crafts at the kitchen table, turning cardboard boxes into castles or making holiday decorations from glitter and glue. When the weather is warm, we water the flowers on the balcony together, Hannah carefully measuring the amount of water as if she were conducting an experiment. And at night, before bed, we curl up on the couch with a blanket and take turns reading chapters from her favorite book. I know I am not perfect. There are nights when exhaustion makes me short-tempered, when lesson plans pile up, laundry waits unfolded, and Hannah's questions stretch my patience. But she is my anchor. Every time I feel overwhelmed, I remind myself that she is watching me, learning from how I carry myself. I want her to see a woman who works hard, who doesn't give up, who builds a life out of love and not just money. And yet, whenever I return to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, it feels as if none of this exists. At that table, surrounded by my father's stern gaze and Josh's smug smirk, my accomplishments evaporate. I become once again the lesser child, the one who didn't bring money or status to the family name. My father never asks how my students are doing or how Hannah is adjusting to middle school. He doesn't want to hear about science fairs or the joy of teaching a child to read. What matters to him is profit margins, deals closed, the size of houses, and the makes of cars. Josh, of course, plays along perfectly. He talks about numbers, investments, promotions. He brags about the latest vacation or the car he leased, even if it is beyond his means. Dad beams at him, proud, attentive, ready to toast his success with another glass of wine. Meanwhile, I sit quietly, sipping water, cutting Hannah's food into smaller pieces, pretending not to notice the silence that greets me when I try to contribute. Sometimes, my mother attempts to smooth things over with a quick, "Natalie works so hard with the children," or "Hannah is growing so beautifully." But even those comments sound perfunctory, like background noise. The real conversation, the one that matters, is always about money. And in that currency, I will never be rich enough to count. A week before that Sunday dinner, the air around my family had changed suspiciously. It began with Josh's text, "Coffee? Just us. Need your advice." He never asked for my advice, he performed for audiences. Still, I met him at Grady's on Maple, the cafe with wobbly tables and the best blueberry muffins. He was already there, cap pulled low like he was hiding from a camera no one was holding, thumb skimming his phone so fast the screen became a blur. "Hey," I said, setting down my tote and the stack of papers I needed to grade. He flinched as if I had caught him doing something shameful. "Hey, Nat." He tried a smile that didn't reach anything behind his eyes. You want a latte? My treat. He flagged the barista with jerky movements, kept glancing at the door, then at me, then back at his phone. Twice during the small talk, whether Hannah's science fair, Dad's barbecue plans, his phone vibrated loudly against the ceramic saucer, and he stared at the screen like it was a bomb he couldn't defuse. You okay? I asked, finally. You're acting like the school principal is about to call your parents. He let out a laugh that sounded borrowed. Work stuff. It never ends. Josh, lover of long lunches and extended weekends, did not say work stuff. He said the grind with an ironic smirk, or he said nothing. I watched him pick at a muffin he didn't touch. The crumb trail looked like a nervous map. He asked a question about my savings, casual as a neighbor asking about the weather. Still putting money away for the house? Every month, I answered, alert now. Why? Before he could answer, his phone lit again, unknown caller. He stood so fast his knee knocked the table and sloshed coffee onto my papers. I have to take this. He was out the door before I could hand him a napkin. Through the window, I saw him pace on the sidewalk, mouth thin, one hand on the back of his neck the way he does when he's cornered. The call lasted 2 minutes. When he came back, his face had a chalky cast. Everything good? I asked. Yeah, fine. He checked his watch that he never wore, then kissed the air near my cheek. Gotta run. Rain check. He left his untouched muffin and the smell of something sour, panic maybe. I packed my damp papers and told myself not to invent problems. But the next afternoon, I drove past my father's office on my way to the grocery store. The company sign, Robert Clark Construction, EST 1996, stood like a boast. 2 company trucks were idling near the loading bay, and Josh's blue sedan was parked crooked in the employee lot. He was supposed to be at the bank, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, wearing his grown-up tie. Our father tells people proudly about his son in finance, as if the word makes us bulletproof. Seeing Josh there felt like spotting a wolf at the petting zoo. I told myself he might be dropping off paperwork. Yet the guilt prickle at the base of my neck wouldn't settle. I considered going inside. Instead, I watched through the windshield. 10 minutes later, I saw him slip out the side door with a man I recognized from town gossip, Brian something, a slick grin and cufflinks too shiny for daylight. They shook hands that looked like a deal or a truce, then Josh disappeared back into the building. That evening, Mom called after Hannah was asleep. She lowered her voice even though she was alone. Your father's been in his office since dinner. Door closed. He's swearing on the phone. About what? I whispered back, mirroring her without meaning to. I don't know. He keeps saying numbers. And deadline. And don't you dare. He never talks like that. I knocked with a plate of apple pie, and he shouted, Not now, Nancy. She was quiet for a moment, small over the line. He hasn't shouted at me in years. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. Is he okay? Is he drinking? No, she said quickly, protective even now. Just angry. I don't like it. After we hung up, I lay awake listening to the refrigerator motor kick on and off. I tried to calculate bills, list the facts, place them in neat rows. Coffee with Josh, the pale face, the call. The car at Dad's office. Dad's voice roughened into someone I didn't recognize. The columns didn't add up. By midweek, the town was humming. In our small Ohio world, news doesn't travel. It seeps like water under a door. On the local forum, the one where people complain about potholes and recommend dog groomers, someone with a blank profile posted, Is it true Clark Construction is losing money? The thread exploded. Some said they'd heard suppliers hadn't been paid on time. Others said nonsense, Robert Clark is rock solid. Look at those new condos by the river. A former employee hinted about changes and tight budgets. A rival contractor chimed in with something that read like prayer disguised as pity. I told myself to ignore it. Online whispers don't build houses, and they don't tear them down, except sometimes they do. On Thursday, a student's dad cornered me after school. He's an electrician who sometimes subcontracts for my father. Everything good at your dad's? He asked lightly, holding a bouquet of construction paper flowers his daughter had made. He's behind on a couple things. I smiled the way women smile when they're told to. I'm sure it'll work out. But inside, my stomach tightened like a pulled knot. That night, Mom texted me a photo of Dad asleep at his desk, lamp still on, glasses askew, the calculator on his chest like a stubborn heartbeat. He's not himself, she wrote. Then, don't worry your brother. He says he's handling it. I stared at the blue glow of my phone and thought of Josh's trembling hands, of the stranger on the sidewalk reflected in the cafe window. On Saturday morning, I saw Josh again outside the bank, even though it was closed. He was on the steps, hunched over his phone, tie loosened, the gloss of him gone. I parked across the street and almost called his name. Then Brian appeared, the same slick grin, a hand on Josh's shoulder pressed a beat too long. They spoke, quick and low. Josh nodded the way you nod when you can't do anything else. I drove on, past the hardware store, past the field where Dad once sponsored fireworks big enough to make the town feel important. I came early because I always come early, the dependable daughter who knows where the good linens are kept and which platter fits the roast. I let myself in through the side door and called out, Mom, want me to start the salad? No answer. The clink I heard wasn't dishes, it was metal on wood, hurried and uneven, coming from my father's office down the hall. The door was half closed. I pushed it gently with my fingertips and saw Josh bent over Dad's desk, the bottom drawer yanked open, files splayed like playing cards in a losing hand. His shoulders stiffened. When he looked up, his face took a second too long to arrange itself into something casual. What are you doing? I asked. My voice surprised me, calm, teacher voice, like catching a kid with a pocketful of markers near a blank wall. He swallowed. I'm looking for some documents for Dad. The words came out too smooth, like a coat of paint hiding a dent. For what documents? I took a step inside. Receipts, contracts, a small stack of envelopes with supplier names on them, Harrison Lumber, Mid-Ohio Concrete, were spread across the leather blotter. A pen cap lay on its side, bitten through. The bottom drawer was crammed with old check registers and the little metal lock had been snapped clean. Job stuff, he said. He asked me to. He needs the, progress billing. Since when do you know where Dad keeps progress billing? I glanced at the desk lamp, blazing at 3 in the afternoon. I thought of his car at the office, the strange men, the phone calls. Josh's hand hovered over a file like he'd forgotten what hands are for. He pushed the drawer shut with his knee and snapped at the latch. God, Natalie, relax. I'm just helping. I picked up an envelope addressed to my father in his own blocky handwriting. Josh plucked it from my fingers with a speed that betrayed him. Don't, he barked. I watched him breathe too fast, as if he'd run upstairs. Okay. Mom's in the kitchen. I asked. He nodded and brushed past me, the citrus aftershave he wears when he wants to seem put together trailing behind him. When he was halfway down the hallway, he turned back. Don't mention this. Dad's in a mood. In the kitchen, the roast was resting on the counter under foil, the potatoes in the oven. My mother stood at the sink, not rinsing anything, just staring out at the backyard. She startled when I touched her elbow. Oh, Natalie. She forced a smile. You're early. Want me to set the table? Please, she breathed, as if the word itself were relief. She handed me the good silver, a wedding gift from long before, and the white cloth napkins. Her hands were damp and cold. When I asked where Dad was, she lifted her chin toward the back hallway. Office. He said not to bother him. Setting the table is a ritual that steadies me, knives facing in, forks to the left, glasses above the knives. I laid the plates one by one, aligning the edges with the grain of the wood because precision is a prayer when you have no other. I tucked Hannah's napkin into a little loop the way she likes and set her seat just off center, where she can kick me under the table when she wants out of conversation. Josh drifted in and out like smoke, straightening a fork, moving a salt shaker, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting, his phone wedded to his palm. He kept tapping the screen, waiting, tapping again. The tapping traveled through my skin like a mosquito you can't sweat. Dad arrived last, grim-faced, the neck of his shirt tight against his throat. He kissed the top of my mother's head without really landing anywhere and sat. We all followed, the choreography of habit clicking into place. Mom poured herself wine before anyone said grace, a bad sign. Josh tapped his fork against the edge of his plate, a nervous metronome. Hannah, next to me, whispered, "Can I have extra potatoes later?" I nodded, slid my hand under the table to squeeze hers. We tried talk. A field trip coming up. The church rummage sale. Everything fell flat. Dad kept glancing toward the office, as if the door were going to open by itself and deliver news. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to ask about school or Hannah or my week. It was to say, pass the gravy, like each syllable cost money. Halfway through, Dad set down his knife with an audible clack. The sound drew a line under the ordinary. He looked at me, not past me, not through me, but at me, with a focus I've only ever seen when he's reading a bid. $500,000, he stated, was transferred to an account in your name. His voice didn't lift at the end like a question. It fell like a hammer. Where's the money? For a second, everything inside me went quiet. My fingers loosened and my glass tipped. I caught it by the stem and set it down too hard. The ripple ran around the rim and made a thin ringing. What? I said, but the word came out silvery and useless. Don't insult me, he said, the old impatience flaring. It went out Friday. Wire transfer. Company funds. Account belongs to you. I haven't, I swallowed. Dad, I haven't received anything. I don't even, why would there be? He reached under his chair for a thick manila folder I hadn't noticed, as if he'd placed it there before dinner and waited for the exact moment his anger would have a prop. He slid out a stack of papers and slapped them down in front of my plate. The top sheet bore my name, my address, my social security number, and my signature. I stared at the loopy N, the tail of the Y. It looked like my hand, but only in the way a reflection in a warped mirror looks like your face. But I didn't sign this, I said. My mouth felt full of cotton. I didn't, Dad, I swear. He snorted. You expect me to believe someone moved $500,000 and put your name on it by accident? Josh had gone silent. He was always the one to jump in with jokes, to lighten or misdirect. Now he just sat there, color drained, eyes on the papers, fork still tapping faster. My mother reached for the stack as if wanting to tidy even this mess. Dad's hand came down on top of hers, and she flinched. Look, I said, flattening my palm on my chest as if to keep my heart from escaping. I don't have that kind of access. I teach first grade. My bank account, Dad, I showed you when I was trying to refinance my car. I would never. He flipped another page. Authorization form. Notarized. The notary stamp smudged a little circle of authority in the corner. He jabbed his finger at it. Your signature. Your driver's license on file. I looked at the photocopied ID clipped to the back. My face, terrible DMV lighting, the same tilt of jaw mine. But something in the numbers, the expiration date, prickled wrong. But I couldn't name it. Panic smudges logic. Hannah pressed her knee against mine. Mom, she whispered, tiny. The room lurched. Protect her, my mind ordered. Protect first. Explain later. I didn't take anything, I said, looking at my father. If this money is missing, then someone did this to me. Not the other way around. The transfer was to a brokerage account opened last month, Dad said. Initial deposit, $5. Friday's wire, $500,000. Beneficiary, Natalie Clark. He spoke the words like he'd memorized them. He probably had. Josh's fork stopped. The silence of it felt heavier than the tapping had. His phone lit beside his plate. He didn't look. Dad, I said, softer, trying to reach the part of him that still remembered my school plays. You know me. He leaned back, crossed his arms, the posture of a foreman about to fire someone. I know what's in front of me. Mom chose that moment to pour more wine and miss the rim, a thin trickle sliding onto the tablecloth. She dabbed at it with her napkin, eyes wide, face pink and strained. Maybe there's a misunderstanding, she tried. Banks make mistakes. Not this mistake, Dad said, and then, to me, low and hard, where is it? I don't remember standing, but I was on my feet, palms flat, the papers between them. I wanted to tear them, to shred the lies into confetti and make him watch it fall. Instead, I lifted the top page and tried to breathe slow. The handwriting, the notary, the clean, ruthless way the numbers aligned, it all shouted certainty. I only had my body and the knowledge of myself as defense, and those look flimsy in the face of ink. I didn't, I said. The words were small and stubborn. I really didn't. Dad's jaw worked. A vein pulsed at his temple. $500,000, Natalie. He said my name like a verdict. Across from me, Josh made a low, involuntary exhale, like someone stepping into cold water. I looked at him. His eyes flicked up to mine and away, quick as a lie. Josh, I said. Did you? He scraped his chair back, so fast one leg caught on the rug and knocked his knee. He grimaced. Don't look at me, he muttered, but the bravado wasn't there. I didn't touch Dad's accounts. He didn't say Dad's, I said before I could stop myself. He said company funds. Dad slammed his palm on the table. The glasses jumped, the roses quivered. Hannah startled and squeezed my hand hard. Enough, he stated. I called the bank. I called the accountant. We traced it. It goes to you. And I'm telling you, my voice broke an embarrassing, girlish crack I hated. I don't know anything about it. We held there, 3 points of a triangle, breathing. Mom whispered Robert, but he didn't turn. He reached for another document, a printout with a bank logo crisp at the top. You think I want this? His voice softened at the edges for the first time, and the tenderness of it hurt worse. You think I want to look at my own daughter and ask, he didn't finish. But I can't cover this. Vendors are calling. People are talking. Somewhere in the house, the old clock in the hall chimed, thin and far away. Dad rang once, decisive, not the way neighbors press when they bring cookies, but the way people press when they are here on purpose. Mom's wine glass trembled. She set it down. No one moved. The bell rang again. Dad pushed back his chair, the scrape carving a raw line in the quiet. He walked to the foyer with the folder under his arm as if he intended to show whoever it was the proof. Josh wiped his palms on his pants and followed, then stopped and hovered in the doorway like someone deciding whether to run. I stood very still, feeling Hannah's fingers braid into mine, the papers still warm under my other palm. From the foyer came the low murmur of male voices. Then a clearer one, official, practiced. Good evening. We're looking for Natalie Clark. My father said my name silently, lips forming the shape as if testing it for weight. The footsteps moved toward the dining room. 2 uniformed officers appeared in the doorway, hats off, polite in the way people are when they know politeness won't help. Their radios crackled softly, a distant storm in their pockets. Ma'am, the taller one said to me. We need to talk. The taller officer stepped just inside the doorway and rested a hand near his belt, not on his holster, but close enough to make my skin prickle. Natalie Clark, he asked, though he already knew. I nodded. Ma'am, you have the right to remain. Wait, my mother blurted, her voice higher than I'd ever heard it. She shoved back her chair so fast it scraped the floor and darted to the sideboard where she keeps spare napkins and a tangle of old birthday candles. From the top drawer, she pulled out her handbag, the big structured one she only uses on Sundays and funerals. Her fingers shook as she rifled through it. Just 1 second. Please. The officer paused and glanced at my father as if to gauge whether this interruption would explode. Dad stood rigid, jaw clenched, the manila folder still under his arm like a weapon he didn't know how to use. Josh remained in the doorway, half shadow, somehow both there and trying not to exist at all. Ma'am, the officer said again, gentle but firm. We do need to. I hired a private investigator, my mother said, and the room inhaled. She pulled a thick, battered envelope from her bag, the kind you buy in a pack of 10 and never think you'll need. The metal clasp had been bent and rebent so often it no longer lay flat. She slapped the envelope onto the table between the wine rings and the stack of accusing papers. I knew Natalie couldn't have done it. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. It's funny how quickly the world can tilt, how a single sentence can pry open the floor beneath your feet. My mother, the woman who smooths tablecloths and keeps the peace with casseroles, had hired a private investigator. Dad recovered first, a frown carving deeper lines into his face. Nancy, what in God's name? Open it, she said, and this time there was no tremor. Robert, open it. The shorter officer, the one with a notebook already half out of his pocket, stepped closer and glanced at me. I nodded because nodding was all I could do. Dad set his own folder down, reached for the envelope, and tugged at the stubborn clasp. He spilled the contents onto the table, glossy photo prints, a stapled report with tabs in my mother's tidy handwriting, and a USB drive taped to a sheet of paper with blue painter's tape. The investigator's name is Marisol Vega, Mom said, as if introducing a friend from church. She used to work for the county. I met her at the library fundraiser. A wild, irrelevant detail, and yet it steadied me. I called her after Robert started shouting at creditors and after Josh asked me whether Natalie still keeps her bank statements in the kitchen drawer. Josh's head jerked. He began, but the words tangled and died. The taller officer cleared his throat. If there is evidence you'd like us to consider, ma'am, we can certainly. Dad had already taken one of the photos into his hands. It was a still frame, enhanced and sharpened, from what looked like a bank lobby camera. The angle was slightly downward. The colors had that too clean quality of digital correction. A person stood at the counter, head bent over a clipboard. Wig and sunglasses. The nose a little smaller than mine, the jawline wrong if you knew where to look. The mouth tight with concentration, the posture familiar. My stomach sank, then burned. That isn't me, I said, and to my own surprise it came out not as a plea but a fact. Mom nodded toward the print. Look at the height, she said, brisk now. And the shoulders. And the watch. Dad leaned closer. The officers did too, their radio static soft as breathing. The watch gleamed in the enhanced image, a stainless steel face with a tiny scratch at 2 o'clock. Josh's watch. The birthday gift Dad had given him for turning 30, engraved on the back. Another still showed a side view at the ATM vestibule, same wig, same oversized sunglasses, same cheap beige trench coat as if pulled from a thrift store drama rack. The figure turned slightly toward the camera, and you could see the edge of a temporary beard prosthetic lifting along the jaw. The hand holding the card had a faint scar across the knuckle, a pale crescent. Josh had gotten that scar at 16 when he tried to vault the backyard fence to impress his friends and caught his hand on a nail. The shorter officer flipped through the stack with a patience that felt like balm. He stopped at a page where a still had been cropped around the signature line on a form. Enhancement here, he asked my mother. She nodded. Marisol zoomed and compared letter forms. Natalie's signature has a looped Y with an upturn. This one drops straight and flattens. She looked at me apologetically. I watched you sign Christmas cards for 20 years. My father's mouth opened and closed. He moved to the next page, captures from a rear parking lot camera, the disguised figure meeting a second man by a dark sedan, exchanging a small envelope, then hurrying to a blue car we all recognized down to the dent on the passenger door. Josh's. The taller officer finally spoke. May I take these? His tone had shifted almost imperceptibly from formal caution to active interest. We'll log them and return what we can. Take all of it, Mom said. Her hands, now free, gripped the back of a chair. There's more in the report. And there was. The stapled packet held timelines and bank names and the PI's notes in neat bullet points. A significant portion traced not just the day of the transfer, but the weeks leading up to it, burner phone purchases, 2 visits to a wig shop 3 towns over, a new mailbox rented in my name with a forged driver's license. Subtle differences that would fool most clerks, but not a woman like Marisol who seemed to be part bloodhound. Then the second set of documents, clipped separately with a big black binder clip like a warning label. Debts, Mom said softly. Marisol got them from a friend in collections. She looked at Josh then, finally, fully, the way a mother looks when the picture she carried in her heart has to be updated to include the truth. I didn't want to believe it. The officer read off the page. Casino markers totaling $212,000. He whistled under his breath and caught himself. Sorry, he continued. Personal loans from payday lenders. 3. And informal notes, loans documented via text messages from numbers associated with individuals investigated for money laundering. Amounts ranging from 5 to 20,000. He tapped the bottom line. Collection attempts. Threats. The room felt smaller, the ceiling lower, the air thicker. I could hear Hannah breathing next to me, quick and shallow. I pulled her gently closer and wished I could fold her back into a time when villains wore capes and you could close the book on them. Josh finally spoke, voice thin. It's a setup. He dragged a hand over his mouth. Anyone could have put on a wig. And your watch, I said quietly. And your car. And your scar. I sell that watch all the time, he snapped. I could have lent the car. He tripped over his own story and skidded to a stop. Dad looked from the photo to Josh to the photo again. Something inside him buckled, like a truss giving way. Joshua, he said. A single word, stripped, not the name he used when bragging about his son at Rotary. Josh stared at the floor. His shoulders lifted and fell, and then he straightened, as if bracing for a pitch he knew he couldn't hit. It wasn't supposed to stick, he muttered. Just long enough to clear some things. I was going to put it back. He shot me a look, defensive, searching, almost pleading. You have savings, Natalie. You're fine. The officers exchanged a glance, an entire conversation in a flicker. The taller one turned back to me. Ma'am, based on this new information, we're not taking you in tonight. Relief slammed through my knees so hard, I had to grab the back of my chair. But we will need you to come down tomorrow to give a statement. He shifted his attention to Josh. Sir, we'll need you to come with us right now. Josh's head snapped up. What? On what grounds? Fraud, the officer said evenly. Identity theft. Embezzlement. We can start there. My mother made a soft sound like a bird hitting a window. She reached for the chair again, then for me, then settled on clasping her own hands together in front of her chest. Dad didn't move. He looked older than he had that morning, older than he had in years. I didn't mean, Josh began, but the officer had already stepped forward. He didn't take out the handcuffs yet. He spoke gently, as if to a skittish animal. We can do this quietly, sir. You can call a lawyer at the station. Josh took a step back. His gaze shot to the kitchen, to the back door, to the hall. For a moment I thought he'd run. Then his eyes flicked to Hannah, and something in his face collapsed. He held out his wrists. The click of the cuffs was softer than in movies, almost anticlimactic. The officers read him his rights, the words that had been meant for me only minutes ago. As they turned him toward the door, Josh twisted his head to look at me. You'll tell them, he said, and I couldn't tell if it was a question or a command or the last reflex of an older brother convinced the world will always rearrange itself around his needs. I'll tell the truth, I replied. He flinched as if slapped. Then he was gone, the sound of the front door swallowing him, the night taking him in. Silence pooled in the dining room. My mother pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth and let out a long, shaking breath. She looked at me, eyes bright with tears and something fiercer. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have told you sooner. I wanted to be sure. Her voice wavered and steadied. I knew. I reached for her hand. Thank you, I said, and those two words held everything, the fear, the betrayal, the relief, the strange gratitude for a woman who had surprised us all. Dad sank into his chair. He lifted the photo again, the one with the watch and the wig and the awful, obvious hope that nobody would notice the difference. At this moment, my phone buzzed, a notification I almost ignored. It was Josh's profile picture, the one with the smug grin and the sunglasses on his head like a crown. He had posted an hour earlier, right before the doorbell. A poll. A joke, he'd probably say. A social experiment. He'd call it later if he got the chance. But there it was on my screen, the ugliest thing I've ever seen written about a child. What's worse, her stupid haircut or her nasty personality? Underneath, 2 neat buttons to tap and vote. And a photo he'd lifted from my private account. Hannah on the balcony, smiling into the sun, wearing the crooked little beret. The comments were a bonfire of cruelty. Laughing emojis as if laughter were free. Yikes, who let the hedge trimmer loose? Attitude for days. Bet she learned it from mom. Cut the bangs and the drama. And then the ones that pretended to be advice. Kids need tough love. Bullying builds character. My parents roasted me all the time and I turned out fine. I scrolled with my thumb and felt each word graze Hannah's skin like sandpaper. I could see the votes climbing, Hairstyle, 62%. Personality, 38%. Numbers used like stones. My mother saw my face and asked, "What happened?" I simply turned the screen around. She covered her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. I reported the post, blocked and flagged and screenshotted like the internet has taught us to do when people forget their souls in public. I wrote to the platform about targeted harassment of a minor, about doxing, about the use of a child's image without consent. Hannah tugged on my sleeve. "Mom?" Her voice was thin. "Why are you shaking?" I pulled her into my lap and held her as if my arms could cancel the internet. "Because some grown-ups forget how to be kind," I said, keeping my voice steady by force. "Because your uncle made a mistake. And none of this is about you." She looked at the photo on my phone, then at the barrette in her hair, fingers gently patting it as if to check whether it had caused an earthquake. "Should I take it off?" "No," I said, immediate, sharp. I softened it. "You made something you love. That's what brave people do." My father asked, voice husky, "What are you talking about?" He doesn't understand apps beyond the weather. So I handed him the phone. He read the words, then scrolled the comments with slow, pained disbelief. When he got to the photo of Hannah, he flinched. For a moment, he looked at a little girl's face and saw the bill come due for the values he had applauded. He set the phone down like it was hot. "He did this. He posted it," I said. "Before the doorbell." My mother whispered, maybe to humiliate or distract. She dabbed at her eyes with the corner of a napkin that still smelled faintly of starch. That was the moment I understood the total cost of my brother's reputation. It wasn't just the money or the falsified signature or the wig. It was the willingness to make a child the punchline so he could buy himself a few more hours of being adored. The collapse wasn't the handcuffs or the photos, it was this pull, this casual violence wrapped in sarcasm, this proof that the golden boy would burn anything that made him look small. The headline landed on a Monday, above the fold of the county paper and copied everywhere online, "Son of Builder of the Year in Scandal involving $500,000. The photo was of my father cutting a ribbon 2 summers ago, smiling at a camera. The article mentioned Josh by name, the charges, and tucked into the third paragraph, me, alleged recipient of funds. By lunch, the TV news vans were idling on our street, reporters rehearsing to camera while holding microphones like spears. A neighbor texted a screenshot of a teaser, "Teacher tied to embezzlement mystery. Details at 6. The video loop they used was me leading my class across the crosswalk, little hands in chains of 2, as if the image could make the euphemism feel true. I turned the television off and sat on the kitchen floor with Hannah while the radiator clanged, counting our breaths until the apartment felt like itself again. Acquittal came quietly, like the opposite of a siren. After my statement and a week of interviews, the DA called to confirm that the evidence cleared me completely. "You are not a suspect," she said. "We appreciate your cooperation." The words were clean, precise, and absolute. But absolution in a courthouse doesn't erase doubt at the school gate. By the end of that week, 3 parents had emailed my principal with concerns, and 2 called directly. I heard the opening lines in my head even before she forwarded them. "We love Ms. Clark, but we just want what's best for our child, given the situation." At pickup, I could feel it in the way some parents' smiles slid past me, polite as saran wrap. Whispered hellos. A few looked grateful to see me, a few looked like they were doing math. The principal, Ms. Fowler, invited me into her office with a softness that told me I didn't need to put on armor. She closed the door and said, "I know this is unfair." She had a binder open already, ready to show me the paper trail proving she had advocated. "We're handling the calls. Your record is spotless. But I think we should talk about a temporary transfer. Not a demotion, Natalie. A lateral move. Curriculum and methodology for the district. Just until this quiets down." I nodded because crying would have cost me oxygen. "How long?" 9 weeks, initially. She reached across the desk and waited for me to meet her hand halfway. "You didn't do anything wrong. But I'm the one who's moving." "I know," she said. "And I hate it." I packed my classroom, labels on bins, a note for the sub about which student needs a sticker before reading group. The kids made me a goodbye banner with misspelled love in every color. Hannah helped me carry a box of picture books to the car, solemn and efficient. "You'll still be helping children," she said, repeating the phrase I had tried out on her first. The methodology department sat in a beige building that used to be a warehouse. My new office smelled faintly of dust and toner. I missed sticky hands and sudden laughter, the way a kid's triumph can ring through a room louder than a bell. But the work mattered. I could tuck reading interventions into fourth-grade units like secret notes and build a math sequence that made sense of fractions instead of scaring teachers. By then, the legal process for Josh had accelerated. He took a plea. His lawyer used words like realistic, strategic, minimize exposure, and the judge accepted it. The sentence arrived in a courtroom that smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Months, not years, but with restitution and supervision and a stern, almost paternal warning about what the next mistake would cost. The wig appeared in evidence, sealed in a clear bag that made it look even cheaper than it had on the screen. I didn't look at Josh while the clerk read the terms. I looked at my mother's hands, folded and steady in her lap. Afterward, reporters tried to catch my father's face in the courthouse steps, the camera popping like flashbulbs at a wedding he hadn't planned. He didn't speak. He guided my mother straight to the car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched the county building shrink and thought about how strange it is that justice and grief can occupy the same bench without touching. The night before the sentencing, my father came to my apartment with a paper grocery bag and a look I didn't recognize. He stood in the doorframe for a long second, as if he wasn't sure whether he was allowed inside. When he finally crossed the threshold, he set the bag on the counter with both hands. "I brought dinner," he said. "Roast chicken." He cleared his throat. "I thought maybe, unless you already made something. So, I made a tea." Hannah set the table and lit the little tea light we saved for company. We ate like civilians, not like injured parties. And at this moment, he slid a white envelope across the counter toward me. "I am sorry," he said. He didn't pad it with qualifiers or reasons. He didn't blame the news or the week or the world. "I am sorry I believed paperwork over my daughter." He tapped the envelope with a forefinger. "There's a cashier's check inside." "It's not," he exhaled. "It's enough to cover the missing amount for the house you've been saving for. You don't owe me anything. It's what I owe you for the doubt, for the damage, for teaching me what choosing trust looks like." I opened the envelope and saw the exact number I needed to cross the line from hoping to closing. For a second, I saw the house I've dreamed of, small, with a porch, a backyard with stubborn grass, a garage that could hold boxes of Christmas ornaments, and a bicycle that is truly ours. I reached across the counter to my father's hand. His fingertips were still rough from years of holding sharp edges. "Thank you," I said. We both understood what else the words contained. My mother changed during those months in ways that still surprise me. She learned the rhythm of court forms and insurance calls, handled the old friends who wanted gossip with lines so polite and firm they sounded like a new language. At home, she set visiting rules for Josh, structured, supervised, honest. She insisted that therapy wasn't a suggestion, but a condition of any future. When extended family tried to reroute the blame toward me because they needed an easy villain, she cut through it like a ribbon at a groundbreaking. "My daughter is not your scapegoat," she told one aunt on a speakerphone call I hadn't meant to overhear. "Find another way to absolve yourselves." School settled, as schools do. Kids kept bringing me artwork, but now teachers brought questions. I ran workshops that used real numbers to show how misinformation multiplies, slipped a digital citizenship lesson into a literacy packet, and watched as the river of rumors slowed to a trickle. Parents who had made the concerned calls later sent emails with apologies tucked inside updates about their children. "We were wrong. Thank you for how you handled this with grace." One slow Saturday in early spring, Hannah and I drove to an open house in a suburb 25 minutes from school. The house was smaller than the photos, as houses always are, but it faced east and the morning light pooled on the kitchen floor. Hannah ran her fingers along the windowsill and whispered, "Our plants would like it here." I measured the dining room by footsteps and pictured our table set and quiet, no accusations, no folders of evidence, just 2 plates and a candle and the sound of forks. So I made an offer the next week. When the call came that it had been accepted, I sat in my car in the school parking lot and laughed until I cried. Then I texted my mother, "We did it." She replied with a photo of a key on a ribbon and wrote, "I've had this ready for months." Superstition kept me from sending it. My father later showed up with a tool belt and a speech about gutters that, for once, felt like love and not performance. The press moved on, as it always does, to fresher tragedies and shinier scandals. The headline became a clipping, then a file, then a story people told less and less often. And in our family, recovery didn't arrive as a single sunrise. It showed up as many small mornings, a phone call answered, an apology accepted, a boundary written down and kept. My mother's steadiness became the beam we rebuilt under, my father's apology the foundation we agreed not to crack, my own teaching, altered but intact, the way I could build again. After everything, Hannah and I finally moved into our own little house. It wasn't grand, just a 2-bedroom place in a quiet suburb, but it was ours. I had spent years saving every spare dollar, and with my father's unexpected help, the dream became real. The first night we slept there, Hannah and I lay on the floor in sleeping bags, surrounded by unopened boxes. She whispered, "Mom, this feels like home," and I felt tears sting my eyes. For the first time in years, I believed her. As for Josh, prison stripped him of the glossy image he had always carried. He started therapy for gambling and wrote me letters from behind bars. Sometimes they were full of anger, blaming everyone but himself. Other times, they were fragile, almost childlike, asking about Hannah and whether I could ever forgive him. I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to protect my daughter from his cruelty, from the humiliation he had caused her. But part of me still remembered the boy who used to hold my hand when we crossed the street, the brother who once made me laugh until I cried. Forgiveness felt impossible, but hatred weighed too much. And for now, I chose silence. The truth, no matter how bitter, is always better than lies. My brother nearly destroyed my life, nearly turned my daughter into a laughingstock, but we rose out of the ashes. Hannah and I built a new beginning, and I promised myself that no one, not even family, would ever decide my fate again. I realized that everything I went through taught me one painful but necessary truth. Family is important, but boundaries are even more important. Blood ties can be strong, but they should never be chains. For years, I let my brother's charm overshadow me. And for a brief, terrifying moment, I almost let them destroy not only me but my daughter. Hannah deserved better. She deserved a mother who stood up for her, who said enough when cruelty was dressed up as a joke, who refused to carry the shame of crimes she didn't commit. And I will never forget the moment I saw my daughter's picture mocked online, turned into a spectacle by her own uncle. Family loyalty has limits, and those limits begin where a child's innocence is threatened. No house, no reputation, no amount of money is worth sacrificing your child's sense of safety and worth. And now I want to ask you, have you ever been betrayed, humiliated, or pushed aside by the very people who were supposed to stand by you? What would you have done in my place? Share your own story in the comments. I promise, someone else will find strength in your words. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Together we can build a space where truth destroys illusions, but gives freedom.